Welcome to whofooadventures, part 6 of our Sedona Vegfest 2019 video series.
This video features Dr. Saray Stancic. Dr. Stancic and I have several things in common. One is we're both diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The other thing that we have in common is that we both have suffered from many symptoms from the medicines the doctors have given us, and have had times where we have felt no hope. Let's listen to her story.
This is a problem solver. As a medical student, it was during the height of the AIDS epidemic. Instead of just saying, oh, this is terrible, she went into infectious disease work and tried to make a difference there. She was faced with her own health crisis, but she ultimately got focused on the solution. Now she's brought her focus to medical education. It's wonderful to meet and be inspired by someone who looks at situations and says, what can I do? I'm one person, but what can I do to make a difference there? I am just thrilled to introduce Dr. Saray Stancic. Please welcome her.
I'd like to begin my talks by simply introducing myself to all of you personally. My name is Saray Stancic, and I have been a physician for 25 years. By training, I am a board-certified internist and infectious disease specialist, a field I became deeply interested in as a young medical student. You see, I went to medical school in Newark, New Jersey in the late 80s, early 90s, and regrettably, that period was coincident with the height of the HIV epidemic. And as you might imagine, within that experience, I witnessed unspeakable human suffering and loss, and I wanted to be part of that solution. So when I completed my internal medicine chief resident year, I went on to a fellowship in infectious diseases. But today, I no longer practice infectious diseases. Today, I practice lifestyle medicine. So lifestyle medicine is a relatively new discipline whose focus it is to educate and empower patients on the importance of optimal nutrition, physical activity, stress management, effective sleep hygiene, the avoidance of tobacco, the reduction or near elimination of alcohol, and the importance of social interconnectedness. Now, why is all of that so important? It's important because the scientific literature tells us that when we address these parameters, we can indeed prevent nearly 80% of chronic disease. But the logical question you may have for me is, how in the world does an infectious disease physician with the background that I just described to you evolve into a passionate advocate and practitioner of lifestyle medicine? And in order for me to effectively answer that question, I need to share with you two separate experiences that occurred in my life that have shaped who I am today. One of them is a personal experience, and the other a professional one. So I'm going to take you back for a moment to October 11th, 1995. On this particular day, I was a third-year medical resident, and I was on call at Beth Israel Medical Center, and it was a really busy night. I was literally running from the ICU to the emergency room and back to the general ward all night. My pager just wouldn't stop ringing. It wasn't until the mid-morning hour that I finally found an opportunity to make it back to my on-call room. I remember making my way there and feeling so deeply fatigued, something I had never experienced before. The minute my head hit that pillow, lights out. Shortly thereafter, as you might imagine, in the midst of that very busy call, I was paged yet again to address another urgent patient matter. But this time, when I tried to get up out of that sleeping position, an extraordinary thing happened. I couldn't feel my legs. I remember reaching down to touch them, and they felt as if they were someone else's. I tried to step down to get help, and it felt as if I was stepping down on a bed of hot coals. Panic set in, and next thing I knew, I was in the emergency room undergoing an MRI of my brain and spinal cord, and those studies confirmed the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis with multiple lesions in both my brain and spinal cord. And so, just like that, everything changed. I was no longer that young, vibrant woman that had walked through those hospital doors earlier that day to start that shift. I was now a chronic illness patient, and I was admitted to the hospital. And with that came what I call the era of drug dependency as the parade of pharmaceuticals marched into my life. I was immediately started on IV steroids and then multiple medicines to treat my now failing bladder, peripheral neuropathy, spasticity, and pain. I was discharged after 5 days and told to come back in a week, because it was then that I would start what my doctors referred to as the DMT, or disease-modifying therapy. They told me this was the key to slowing the progression of this chronic neurologic disabling disorder, and without it, I would likely be in a wheelchair within 10 to 20 years. I can tell you that hearing those words at age 28, very difficult. Of course, I was going to do whatever my doctors asked of me to prevent that from happening. So I returned a week later, and my doctor sat me down, and he said, Saray, although this drug is quite effective, I want you to know it's not going to be easy. This is a drug that you're going to have to inject every day. And I said, for how long? And he said, for the rest of your life. He said, this is a drug that has a significant side effect profile that includes fever, chills, muscle aches and pains, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, anorexia, injection site reactions, hair loss, depression, and suicidal thoughts, to name a few. But he said, don't worry, because I know exactly what to do to reduce the likelihood that you'll ever experience any of those side effects. So my ears perked up. He said, you're going to do two things. 30 minutes before you inject the drug, you're going to pre-medicate with Tylenol or ibuprofen. And secondly, and most importantly, you're going to inject this drug right before you go to bed. This way, you'll sleep through all the side effects. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that not once did I sleep through the side effects. I would inject the drug at 10 o'clock at night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would awaken with violent shaking, chills, fever, etc., etc. After doing this for a couple of weeks, I didn't think I could do it much longer. I mean, I wasn't just a full-time MS patient. I was still a medical resident, still a young woman trying to live her life. So I picked up the phone to let him know I was calling it quits. But before I could get a word in edgewise, he told me, you know, it's not even an option. And he reminded me of the wheelchair in case I had forgotten. He said, look, I know this is difficult, and the side effects are challenging, but I know exactly what to do. What we'll do is we'll treat the side effects of this drug with other drugs. So when I couldn't sleep at night, I was given a prescription for Ambien. When I couldn't wake up in the morning, I was given a prescription for Provigil, an amphetamine-like drug. And when I became depressed because my life was unraveling, I was given a prescription for Prozac. By the time I was in my early 30s, I had snowballed into this chronic illness patient dependent on nearly a dozen drugs to get through a typical day, and despite all of these medicines, my disease progressed and my quality of life suffered immensely. 8 years into the diagnosis, I was largely dependent on a cane or set of crutches, and to be frank, I began to lose hope. And then, in 2003 came what I call my aha moment, and it came in the oddest of ways. At this point, I was chief of infectious diseases at the Hudson Valley VA in New York, and I was sitting in my office. My secretary walked in to deliver the Daily Mail, as she would every day. But on this particular day, she dropped this big stack on my desk. It caught my attention. I looked over, and on top of this stack, I saw a journal, and on the cover of the journal, I saw the words multiple sclerosis, and of all things, blueberries. And I thought to myself, what in the world could blueberries have to do with multiple sclerosis? So I dropped everything, I picked up the journal, I turned to the article, and what I read was a poorly constructed, unscientific study that essentially took a group of MS patients and fed them a diet rich in blueberries, and the other half just a standard American diet. And the authors had the audacity to conclude that the patients who ate the blueberry-rich diet felt better. Not a very objective clinical endpoint. I mean, I was a physician, a scientist. I couldn't believe someone had spent time and money on such a silly study. I had lunch with a colleague of mine that afternoon. He laughed. So did I. But there was something about this silly little blueberry study that I couldn't get out of my head. And it wasn't that I thought eating blueberries was going to solve my problems. A much more important question surfaced from that line of thinking. For the first time in my adult life, I considered the following question: could there be a connection between diet and disease?
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to watch the next video where Dr. Saray Stancic shares the connection with blueberries and multiple sclerosis.
And also subscribe for more whofoo content, including more from the Sedona Vegfest 2019 video series.